Hello and welcome. I'm glad to have you back. I know the comment section on my last video got a little wild. I hope that this section is a little bit better. I'm kind of done rolling in the mud. Don't get me wrong, I'm a pig in the mud. I love going back and forth, especially with people who are just ignorant and people who are so lonely that they have nothing better to do than go onto a trans YouTube channel who talks about Dark Souls and leave mean comments. You don't have to give me a lesson on gender ideology, bud. I teach a course. Speaking of, you'll never guess who approached me to teach that course. You might have heard of him before. He's actually a pretty debonair sort of figure in the commenter space. Okay, so I was approached by a media company, and it was named after that Christopher Nolan movie. You know, not like the Dark Knight series, but it's the movie, it's got Denzel Washington's son, and time, like sometimes time goes backwards, and it's got Robert Pattinson, and they got to do the bimorphic quake waver at the end and temporal pincer maneuver. And they talk about how you can't drop the bullet. You had to have already dropped the bullet, and then reverse time lets you pick up the bullet. So when you're in reverse time, the physics works different. And this is brought up again in the way that the air is handled in there, because you have to take air canisters and put them through this big reverse air machine. So that you can breathe when your whole body is in reverse time, not just an object in terms of like the entropic state of the item. If this sounds like nonsense, it's a Christopher Nolan film. It's supposed to be nonsense. I've gotten more angry the more I've thought about it, actually. But when you consider that the air affects the lungs so viscerally, what would a process like a bowel movement do to the sphincter of Denzel Washington's son if he's held in reverse time for a long enough period to undergo like a digestive process? Or does his body naturally reproduce a meal out of the nutrients drawing from the cells in his body, and then create like a sort of chewed up steak that then goes into his mouth, and then he's spitting out like a steak? And it's like that scene in The Matrix where Hugo Weaving's eating the steak and he's like, oh, you know what's good for me? This steak. Nah, that was Cypher. You ever think about how Cypher got pulled out of the Matrix in that scene? Because if you consider the time Tank said, hey, when you're in the Matrix, I can see exactly what you're doing. It all moves on the screen like ones and zeros to you, but I know these ones and zeros. But then the dude's in the Matrix talking to Agent Smith, making a deal to sell out the Nebuchadnezzar, and no one ever goes and looks at the screen while he's in. How did he get out of the Matrix? Don't you have to call through a landline to an operator? Who was operating the landline when he was doing that? Did the machines have control over the Nebuchadnezzar when Cypher was eating the steak with Agent Smith? These are the kind of things that keep me up at night. But the kind of things that keep my bank account full are named Edward Gregorian. When I was told that name, I was a little shifty. I was like, hey, has he ever worked with anyone cool? And they were like, yeah, he worked with Dave Rubin and Tim Pool. And I was like, nah, I mean cool. I'm sorry, not... No one wants to go to Tim Pool's skate park. That guy's like 40 and wears a beanie all day. And Dave Rubin, oh my goodness, the pick-me gay? No thank you. I'll go be the ugly trans bitch instead. And the Edward Gregorian absolutely loved it. He said, you know what? We're going to brand you the woke queen. You're going to go on YouTube. You're going to make a few Dark Souls shorts, and I'll pay you $400K an episode. All you got to do is be woke. You got to make this piece of media that is all of the gamer snoo. It keeps them comfortable at night. They cuddle against this dark soul and it nestles them as they listen to their lore videos. And it challenges their worldview to look at it as an actual piece of art through any lens of subjectivity, because everyone brings their own experience to a game, but everyone in the Dark Souls community watched Vati Vidya's Dark Souls lore videos, so they seem to know everything about Dark Souls. But what they won't know is Vati Vidya named himself after a Minish Cap character. And you know what? It's not even a good guy. Vati Vidya named himself after a bad guy. How's that for Dark Souls? I'm sorry, Vati Vidya, if you happen to watch this. I don't mean to expose you or anything. It's just Minish Cap was one of my favorite games. And then I go to look for Dark Souls lore, and I see you. And you're not creating Minish Cap content. You're creating Dark Souls lore. I felt betrayed. I thought better of you. You didn't even say video games. You said vidya. Anyways, thanks for clicking on this video. As far as the catacombs go, I haven't gone through the catacombs normally in such a long period. And it's weird because I killed one of the necromancers and got the skull lantern, which lights up an area, right? Well, there's a way to use the skull lantern, and I do not use it in this episode. At least not as far as it's supposed to be used. One comment I do want to talk about, though, is on my last video, someone said, oh, no one cares about your life story, just give us the Dark Souls. I just want to say, go somewhere else. When I was in 3rd grade, my teacher, Miss Lewis, we had a show and tell every week. And I would come in, and I would be so excited to tell my stories of Pokemon. I think it was Pokemon Ruby at the time. And I'd go around with my Torchic, and we'd fight Pokemon in the grass. And I'd come into class so excited to tell the story. And after about 7 or 8 weeks of that, Miss Lewis pulled me aside and went, you know, Chloe, I don't think people are really responding to your Pokemon stories. And it's because they didn't want the Pokemon. They wanted me. When I look at the likes on these videos before I came out of the closet and the likes now, 60 dislikes on Quaylog was trans. 60 dislikes? I thought it was a good video. I thought it was a clever joke. Did any of you check the description? Anyway, I plan to keep making Dark Souls content. I'll probably keep trolling around. I don't really care about the people spreading hate, but the way they act should be taken note of. These are people who are coming on to me and saying, hey, you have mental illness, you're this or that, and saying all these things, but look at how they're treating me. Are they coming in with any form of compassion or kindness or, hey, we recognize you as a person. We love that you're making YouTube videos. Keep making great art. Because I'm going to tell you something. Trolling is an art, and a lot of people don't know that. It seems to have been lost to time. And Donald Trump goes up and says, oh, we do a little trolling here. And then I go and make a woke nation and make $2.3 million from Edward Gregorian, who allowed Tim Pool to be a Russian plant. But I was rooting for Jan Nepomniachtchi in the 2021 Chess World Championship presented by FIDE between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen. And I was super excited when Jan Nepomniachtchi was able to tie with Magnus Carlsen in the recent Blitz Championship. But I guess I just didn't have what it takes to be a Russian plant. Before I wrap up, I just want to say, in episode 1, I said, don't ask about the crow. And I just want to share, we had an incident. I'm not going to name names, Dad, but we don't talk about the crow. It's not something we talk about. It's not something we share. It's not something you ask about, because when you ask about the crow, you're really just putting someone on the spot. There's nothing significant about the crow, but people think the goddess Velka represents the crow, or that the crow represents the goddess Velka. And in reality, that's actually not correct. The goddess Velka represents sin in the world. And when you consider what the chosen undead are, they're a blight on the world, and they're able to come back to life. In this episode, we went and saw the Dark Gravelord Nito, or whatever his name is, and we went and stood at his altar. Gravelord Nito, we're gonna go kill him. We're a chosen undead. What does the Lord of Death have to do with the chosen undead besides getting taken down? The chosen undead, believe it or not, is not the good guy in Dark Souls. You do not play the good guy in Dark Souls. The world is fine without the chosen undead, but the chosen undead just has to come in here and has to say, hey, we'll pay you $2.3 million to create pro-Russia content, but you can't talk about Jan Nepomniachtchi anymore. But I couldn't do it. Jan Nepomniachtchi, if you're watching this, I absolutely love your chess playing. I'm a big fan. To the rest of you, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate the supporters. You guys, sometimes I make these videos and I'm like, oh, I don't know. I mean, in the Navy one, I get really personal with it. And again, Sticky Basket is a character, but Chloe Nolan is an actual person. So maybe I do have to do a little bit better job of defining the line between the two. But I do appreciate the love and support that I receive from you all. You make making videos such a pleasure, and I'm so glad that you were able to join me on this journey through Dark Souls. We've made it through the Catacombs. We're going to have the Tomb of the Giants coming up later this weekend, so stay tuned. And I know I said last week I'd get to Sen's Fortress, but the Tomb of the Giants, I don't know if I can cut that down to a reasonable enough amount that I can even fit Sen's Fortress in. I might not be as good at Dark Souls as I thought I was, and I wasn't actually paid $2.3 million. I just think it's funny that conservative pundits are paid $2.3 million for being Russian plants, and I just make videos and people come in and say I'm fucking corrupting the youth or being woke. You know? I just play Dark Souls and call it woke. I think it's funny. Insult the gamer, snoo, you know? So, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for your support. Really, it means the world to me. So, I hope you have a great day. Bye.